Hi, I decided to create this video in order to give you some information concerning the Greek economic crisis. As I was surfing the internet and watching several television channels, international ones, I noticed that quite often the explanation concerning the Greek economic crisis that's given is very simplistic and sometimes false. I would hear things like the Greeks were spending too much, they were overcharging their credit cards, they were living high. And of course that's a very simplistic and I could even say maybe childish explanation of the crisis in Greece. Things were much more complicated, and what I'm going to try to do is give you a background of the problem and a timetable of events that led to our economic crisis, the present one. Also, I'll try to tie that in with the global economic crisis, which of course is not irrelevant to the problems that we have here in Greece. Now, everything started in 1998, where the Prime Minister of Greece, Kostas Simitis, together with a team of economists and together with Goldman Sachs, created a set of financial instruments and derivatives that basically hid a great part of the Greek debt. Now, that had obviously very important ramifications to the Greek economy for the years to come. 2 years after that, in the year 2000, Greece entered the common currency of Europe, the euro, based on that falsified data. Obviously, Greece did not cover any of the prerequisites needed to enter the euro, and we were essentially presenting data that was not real, that did not reflect the reality. This, of course, was something that was not known, at least to the Greek people. We found out about this many, many years later. So, Greece acquired a common currency that was the euro, which was in no way suitable for a poor country of Southern Europe like Greece. 4 years later, we had the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games made every Greek proud, of course, that the games returned to the country where they were created. But the spending was quite immense, and everybody had the assumption that since we took the responsibility to organize the games, that the Greek government had secured the necessary funds in order to fund such an expensive project. Obviously, again, based on falsified data and on the infamous practice of hiding debt, the money was not available, quite simply. In the same period, we have a set of corporations, German, French, American, but mostly German, that were engaging in Greece in quite questionable business practices, and I would say probably criminal. For an example, Siemens, and this is stuff that somebody can find in Greek and German media. Siemens had practically corrupted most of the politicians of Greece, and that was in order to gain and to achieve expensive and of course for them very lucrative government projects that were very much so overly priced and cost the Greek government billions of euros. Now, excuse me, and that is part of the problem. In reality, all these funds that were being used for projects were not available. And mind you, I am not giving any kind of an excuse to the next government of Kostas Karamanlis, which is in the opposing political party, that governed Greece from 2004 to 2009, which he continued the same practice of hiding debts that Goldman Sachs initiated in 1998, and another scandal during that period caused a lot of problems, which was how the Greek pension funds that were initially invested in bank accounts and closed bank accounts and in Greek bonds were were taken, those funds were taken and invested in structured bonds from companies like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and others that were, even though were supposed to be safe investments, we found out later, like in the Senate hearings that I saw on Bloomberg, where some representatives of Goldman Sachs were called in to give some explanations about their practices, how these companies were creating these structured bonds from loans that they had received from the mortgage market. And we found out that a lot of those loans were state your income loans, which means that people would go into the bank in the United States, they would state their income, not prove it. They would say, I make $300,000 a year, please give me a loan, and they would get a loan. Of course, such an investment was not in any way safe, and they would take those loans and structure them into bonds that they in turn sold to around the world. And part of those bonds were bought from the Greek pension funds. And how it was decided for those bonds to be bought is another interesting question that one wonders, and I do have some answers to that I'll present later on. So we reach the year 2010, where we have George Papandreou suddenly revealing out of the blue that Greece's debt is not 4%, but it's actually 12%, quite higher. And that eventually brought in the IMF. Now, it makes somebody wonder how a member of the same government as with Kostas Simitis, which initiated this practice in 1998, seemed so surprised to discover that these investments, if you can call them so, these loans were hiding debt, and he, out of the blue, decided to reveal it. Very questionable. One makes you wonder if there are any interests behind this. This led the markets, of course, to panic, and for Greece to essentially enter a bid depression, and that brought us the IMF. Now, that is the series of events that took place in Greece, and I'm going to try and tie that in with the global financial situation. For one thing, I heard recently that Bloomberg had asked that from the Central European Bank Director Claude Trichet to provide them with 2 documents concerning the methods used to create those Goldman Sachs derivatives, which he denied to provide under the explanation that that would cause too much turmoil to the markets. And it makes one wonder, how can someone have a European Union, a true European Union, one, obviously the European officials and the leaders of our Greek government were aware of this and did nothing to stop it or to somehow control it. And this is not a Greek phenomenon, this is a global phenomenon. And let's be frank, derivatives and credit default swaps are basically bets. They're bets that have a certain statement on an event, if it will happen or not. And depending on what side of the bet you take, and depending on how the event unfolds, you win a certain amount of money.